Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Becoming a Gibborim. This is part, 18? Maybe 19. I don't have a total database of this in my head currently because there's a torrential downpour of rain that's going on in the background. Take a second. Listen to that. It's a wonderful sound. If you guys haven't ever lived inside a rectangle, by that I mean my RV, or gone camping where you hear the pitter-patter of rain on a tent, or that wonderful clicky-clacky noise if you have a metal roof, it's a fantastic sound. So I'm just going to let that be, you know what, the background noise that you all get to hear as we go along on this journey, because I'm doing an audio recording today. We're going to be jumping all over some sweet story time. If you guys haven't got your Bibles ready, go get a stinking Bible in your hand, not your phone. Put it down, even if this is a recording from your phone. That's okay. I'll forgive you this time. But you need a Bible. If you don't have one, you're literally swordless. And we're going to be addressing some of the pieces of your kit that you must EDC. You must every single day carry. And the Bible, you know, it may not have been something you ever thought about being part of your EDC, but it really needs to accompany you about your person on a regular basis without excuse. Do you know what I mean? But there is also one piece of armor that is predicated to be more important. It's said to be far more important. Actually, let's just go there right now. You know what? Because if you don't know about shields, it's time you learn about shields. I know I've been threatening doing an entire episode on nothing but armor, but listen, I got so distracted by doing my linen and by armor research when I found linen. Guys, I can't even tell you how much my life has been sidetracked and transformed, utterly transformed. My entire clothing wardrobe and everything I've thought about for the last month has been radically transformed when I started studying linen and electricity, because I got hooked on a verse that talked about being poisoned by dragons in Isaiah. I'm pretty sure it's Isaiah. I got to look it up again. But there's a description of being poisoned by dragons as part of kind of a condemnation. Do you know what I mean? Like part of our judgment. Let me look it up for a second. See, you guys can just listen while I type on my fingers. Maybe you can't. Deuteronomy. I take it back. It's actually the last portions of Deuteronomy. So those of you that haven't read Deuteronomy recently, stop what you're doing, and today's assignment, read Deuteronomy. Actually, in a day. Can you read one book of the scriptures today? Obviously. Everybody knows you can get away with Jude, maybe even Philemon, tuck in a little Titus on a Thursday. But no, I'm telling you right now, I challenge you right now to a sword fight. And my sword is swinging at Deuteronomy. You ready for this? And read some different translations. Don't just get buried in your NIV garbage. It's not terrible. It's not like you can't read the word and understand it. It's just there's some absolute poisons of dragons in the NIV. Actually, you can look up a lot about Bible translations. Like I've said before, there's a few that I like, but I like a variety. I'm like a shotgun or approach kind of man when I do my studies. I've got a few different versions huddled about my person on a regular basis because, frankly, you King James folks, I know you're diehards, but I don't read Elizabethan English anymore. Do you know what I mean? We really don't speak like that, and so it's unutterable. I really can't even speak some of the words. But that being said, I'm not afraid of trying to overcome that. I just found it to be far more understandable, legible, to read in translations that make more sense. But I've been a big fan of some of these. So guess this what? This is Deuteronomy. This is chapter 32, verse 33. You ready for this? Their wine is the poison of dragons and the cruel venom of asps. Asps. All right, asps are like pit vipers. Have you ever seen a pit viper? They're horrifyingly wonderful creatures. They're masterful hunters of the desert places. And sometimes, if you haven't read Psalm 91 too, and it talks about like I will give you the power to tread on lions and serpents. The serpents that it's talking about there are like the horned serpent. These are some extremely venomous creatures, okay? And if you didn't know it, dragons are also very poisonous. Yep. Because later on in Numbers, also throughout the scriptures, we read about how Yahweh sent fiery nachash, fiery serpents, that's dragons, into the camp, and they bit people with poison and killed them. So yes, dragons have poison. So do asps, which are like venomous serpents, okay? And if you don't know what it's like to run or try to hide from a venomous snake, it's darn near impossible. If that thing has it out for you, you're just going to die. So I got really, I don't know, 2 or 3 days into studying armor, and then I started studying poisons again because they just naturally seem to go together in my life. And I ended up discovering this wonderful creature out there that lives in the rocks. Not the Black Mamba. The Black Mamba is one of these venomous snakes out there that is just so unbelievably fast and massive that it accounts for a fair number of deaths of even large creatures like potentially elephants. Let's just think about that for a second. Last time, when I'm looking into toxicology and studying like all these wonderful things about venom and its different traits like cytotoxins and what they do to the body, the people stop comparing it to how many humans it could kill with a single bite, and they start comparing it to bigger creatures like it could kill 11 bull elephants with a single bite. And so because of that, I got really distracted in there. But I started thinking about in Deuteronomy when it says some of the aspects of how we get judgment or curses placed against us. It literally made me think about what in the heck is the poison of dragons? Have any of you guys thought about what the poison of a dragon is? Well, I did. And you know what I think it really is? Are you ready for this? Electricity. What? What are you even talking about? Electricity. I think in a very serious way, the electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation is kind of become the poison of dragons that we've all consumed and are being punished with and through. Because, now listen, hang with me here. Some of you are going to think I went Amish. False. Truth is, I've gone completely like research heavy into things like what in the world is electricity? How did it get its foundations? And why is the world the way it is? See, once I get stuck into stuff like that, I end up looking into things like Babylon. Like, what is Babylon? What is Babel? What happened at Babel? What was going on there that made it so catastrophically a bad idea that Yahweh sent down his destroyer? Let's just take a second and like think about that. Okay, I probably should look it up because some of you guys may not know what I'm talking about. And that's not okay. That's definitely okay. Don't worry about it. You always have time to learn. But if you didn't know it, there's a really foundationally important moment that happens in life after the flood. This is post-flood time, okay? So pre-flood, we have these watchers, these fallen angels who shape-shifted themselves, came down, left their first estate, meaning where they were heavenly abodes, and they changed themselves so that they could canoodle with women in the most kind of egregious way. And they gave secrets to man. Yeah, that's a problem. Those secrets get us in all kinds of trouble. This is where like this mystery religions come through. This is why certain people engage in necromancy, like King Saul. Reference previous Becoming a Gibborim video where we talked about King Saul and the sorcerers that kings consult with. There's a lot that happened with there. We're going to talk about Balaam probably today. Good gracious. Numbers 20 through 25 is one of the most hallmark important passages of your entire Bible. And I actually teach you how to identify horrible deceptions that are taking place and one of the mechanics of the kingdom of darkness and how they ensnare the souls of men. Okay, but I'm getting a little distracted here. Hold on. You ready for this? This is, let's see, Genesis chapter 11. It says, "Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words, and it came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they used brick for stone, and they used tar or asphalt for mortar. And they said, 'Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into the heavens. And let us make for ourselves a name. Otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.' And Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And Yahweh said, 'Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. So come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech.' And Yahweh scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because Yahweh confused the language of the whole earth. And from there Yahweh scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth." Okay, this is one of those basically most important things that happens in the history of the world, okay? This is why, like, if you guys haven't seen it, when the EU was established and set up. Their literal mascot image is the Tower of Babel. This is where so much of the mystery religions are always trying to regather and reignite and rekindle, collect again that hidden wisdom, that knowledge. It all got scattered here, guys. It was divided according to the number of the sons of Elohim. They literally, it split and fractured the world. It scattered the languages, but also with that, the hidden knowledge that they all had reaccumulated by being of one mind and one tongue and of one purpose. And it does say, Yahweh says that they would be able to do anything that they put their minds to with that great unity of purpose and thought. And because of that, he had to scatter them. That was a mercy in order to deliver them from that which they were seeking to do. All right? So I literally have begun studying, and here's the book. Oh, you guys can't see this, but I'll try to figure out how to roll in some videos and pictures of this. The book is called The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life by Arthur Furstenberg. I'm going to say this right now. I've endorsed a couple of books in my days, predominantly The Sword of the Covenant. I also reference, obviously, my book, Snatched from the Flames. And then the other one was The Insanity of God, which was written by an anonymous man who's put his name under a different name. And then more recently, another book, which I did in my last video, which is shout out to you, Mr. Paul Alexander, Journey into Madness, which was just a man's spectacular endurance story of him traveling around the Isles of Ireland, circumnavigating the island by paddle and kayak. It was amazing, inspirational. I get hooked into reading wilderness survival stories, guys, because my life has been a wilderness survival story, and sometimes it just makes me, feel like I'm a normal human a little bit more when I read about people's epic endurance feats. But back to The Invisible Rainbow. If there is any book I can recommend to you right now that you actually read with your eyes, it's this one. Oh my goodness. There is so much that I have learned about the history, first of all, of electricity. And I love history. I'm fascinated by it. I'm always curious by it. That being said, this book dives in from like the early 1700s and takes you all the way right up into the now's time. And it's incredible study of electricity. Back then they called it the electric fluid. And they didn't really know what in the world was going on with this thing. And so they studied it as if they didn't know what they were doing. Not that. They studied it as if they didn't have so much pride in themselves that they had an understanding that they didn't really know what this stuff was, and we should learn and build a scientific body of knowledge surrounding it. And what happened is, as they were doing studies on it, they began to realize that, you know what's interesting? Electricity interacts with our bodies more so than just when we shove it in our face and zap ourselves through our heart with it. They discovered that there is a scalability factor of influence that electric fluid can have on a person, meaning certain people are very easily electrified. Certain people have a much higher susceptibility and influence to electric fields. They have the ability to be changed by them much more rapidly or openly than other people. There's some people who almost could not be electrified. And he talks some incredible stories as people would just go around electrocuting themselves or other people as kind of a way of figuring out what this stuff was and what they could do with it, and how you could make a daisy chain of humans, just everybody hold hands, and everybody on the one end hold my hand, and everybody on the other end hold their hand, and somebody would get electrocuted at one end, and it would go all the way around everybody simultaneously. But they discovered things like, wow, if somebody has a really high fever, or the other reference is if they had smallpox, the chain would be broken. That person couldn't be electrified. So they began to realize there's some differences that are going on. Other people, they realized, were so susceptible to it that it would make them sick. That being exposed to an electromagnetic field was physically making people ill. Some of the chronic descriptions of illnesses that were accompanying this were things like irritability, sleeplessness, anxiety, heart palpitations, like a panic attack, depression, suicide, all those kinds of things. Later on, he also links it to diabetes, heart disease, cancer, the activation of tumor cells growing in your body by creating an low oxygen environment, activating anabolic metabolism in the body, in the cells, creating tumors to grow. He goes through from the beginning to end of this, of understanding and diagnosing why so many diseases have manifested in mankind since electrification began. It's one of the most jaw-dropping kind of forays I have had in a long time. And I've read a lot of stuff. I've studied a lot of stuff out there, guys. I used to just peruse YouTube all down the rabbit hole channels as much as I could. Shout out to the Down the Rabbit Hole. Gosh, TRDE, the rabbit, Down the Rabbit Hole. You guys know what I'm talking about out there that are super woke town. But that being said, deep inside the rabbit hole, boom, got it. Met him at a conference that some of you are going to find objectionable. Get over it. Anyways, I have been diving down to the unbelievable planes of understanding what electromagnetic fields do to the body. And there is a thing, but where about 8 to 20% of the population has a much higher susceptibility to an electromagnetic field causing dis-ease in the body, okay? And so he goes through an unbelievable amount of statistical analysis from pulling off of data and studies from the 1930s to the 1950s, where a lot of rural communities were electrified. Thank you, Mr. President Roosevelt. And how much cholesterol, heart disease, and or cancer broke out in those communities post-electrification. But listen, there's always a caveat. There's people that want to suppress the truth. Conspirators are afoot. Yes, the poison of dragons is there, right? And you know what the real dragons really are? Corporations. Most corporations are really run by dragons. Black dragons. Not the color, folks. The kind. If you don't know what a black dragon is, study state ambassadors, okay? Because I talk about that a little bit in the book. That's one of my little breadcrumbs that I drop in there about doing work for black dragons. See, it's a double entendre because you're talking about a physical manifestation of a spiritual entity on the earth. Yes, I just equated state ambassadors with dragons of spiritual kind. It's real, folks. The world is run by black magicians, sorcerers, and industrial psychologists. Chelsea is going to be putting out a video here shortly where she is going to be talking about the world of vanity and how it's really been run by people that are just trying to steal the souls of people and make a bunch of money off of them in order to consume their hope, their joy, and to completely corrupt what is beauty in the world. So look forward to that one. But I digress. The Invisible Rainbow also has a fantastic side-along book that he goes through a lot of his information from a guy named Dr. Samuel Milham. Dr. Samuel Milham wrote a book that is called Dirty Electricity, Electrification and the Disease of Civilization. My goodness, folks, go read these two books. Go read them all the way from beginning to end. Now, granted, The Invisible Rainbow it's gigantic, okay? You're going to look at it and be like, that's a really big book. I'm not comfortable reading it. But it's only because the book is realistically, it's about 385 pages, but then there's another 200 or so pages of citations that are all in there, and they're categorized and alphabetized by individual chapters because he has so many references that he goes through in here. But these two books have been so transformational for me of getting an understanding with what happens to our bodies when we are in the presence of an electromagnetic field. And one of the areas that he addresses most specifically comes out of research that was done by people all over the world who actually looked at the electric fluid and analyzed what it did to people that was causing things like neural asthenia. This was things that made people sick from being in the presence of it, right? Like microwave, like radar station operators. Okay, in the Soviet Union, they actually have diseases that are titled about this, or now I guess Russia. I apologize to you people that are not behind a wall of iron anymore. I think we are always been the ones still behind walls of iron, so forgive us for that too. It's mutual. That being said, they've known about these things in a lot of other countries for many decades, but, you know, big corporations, remember the dragons, like to keep their poison quiet. They don't want people to know they're being poisoned because good poisons really work the best by you not knowing that you're presently being poisoned, especially if you want to siphon off the lifeblood of them. See previous videos where I talk about soul ties and how they're just trying to seek to kill, steal, and destroy. Anyways, they do a tremendous work here to try to expose what is happening in the body metabolically, okay? When you eat food, what happens is your body has these wonderful things inside the cells called the mitochondria. The mitochondria are like the powerhouses. They're like the working man station. They're like the power station that's going to convert the fuel that's coming in to wonderful energy, okay? Basically, I know some of you nutritionists out there. Shout out to Chris and Liz Bailey, you champions of the night. I love you guys. Basically, what happens when you eat up food, right? You've got three kind of main food groups. You take up proteins, taking up carbs, taking up sugars or delicious things like that. Anyways, you break them down into a few different things. And the process that starts to break it down, right, starts going down in your body, and you get things like fatty acids, or fats too, sorry. Don't forget fats, because when you break down fats, you get fatty acids and triglycerides and wonderful things like that. But when you break down proteins, you get amino acids. And when you break down carbohydrates, you get glucose. Okay, these are kind of the main building blocks that our body uses to make energy. And then they use something called the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle? Oh, man. I'm falling apart here. I got to be honest, guys. This is way back a couple weeks ago research now, which for me, I've read a lot of... Oh, electron transportane. Sorry, I'm there. He gets into this in the book a lot because it's really fundamental to understanding what happens in the electron transport chain, which is where our food gets yoinked from what it was supposed to be converted into in our bodies and not. Okay, so once your food starts to get broken down into the smaller kind of building blocks, it goes down to this area called the electron transport chain. And it's within there that oxygen we breathe in is supposed to be able to actually work with those food molecules to convert electrons and bind with electrons, individual electrons, by the way. As it goes through this process, it would bind it to it, and then it would convert that little tiny bind to ATP, or energy, water or carbon dioxide, okay? This is a super overview. That's probably a little bit janky, but you guys got to work with me here. That being said, what happens is when you're in the presence of an electromagnetic fuel or electromagnetic field, you actually disrupt that cycle. You cause that electron transport chain and that enzymatic change that was supposed to happen, that conversion rate, to get slowed down. Now, oxygen is now your body is now being starved of oxygen. You no longer have enough oxygen to cause that process to happen efficiently. And so you see that manifest with different diseases, like suddenly lots of blood sugar. Oh my gosh, blood sugar problems. And your body's now having to work way harder to try to balance your blood sugar out. And or you're getting a lot of problems of things coming out of your urine that should not be in your urine, right? You get all kinds of autoimmune disorders, or you get heart disease because your body begins to put fat back onto the walls of the cells because it can't process the triglycerides or the fatty acids. Or you can't even get those amino acids to take up. Oh my gosh, do you guys get where this is going? If you have an oxygen-deprived environment for a cell, it will turn into a tumor cell. This is why we're growing tumors in our bodies, okay? And this hits close to home because we've had family members, young ones, young teenagers die of brain cancer, fast, aggressive, horrible brain cancers. We have lots of people that we have loved and cared, seen being destroyed by health disorders that have no normal known reasons, panic attacks, fear and restlessness, irritability, unable to sleep at night, gripping heart attacks, heart pains, numbness in your limbs, tingling sensations in your body, tinnitus, all these things that are going on. You know what a lot of it is, folks? You're being bathed in the presence of electromagnetic fields that are poisoning you in a very physical and, I believe, spiritual way, because I believe it was orchestrated by design to undo the curse of Babel. Yes, that is where I'm going with this. This is the enemy's undoing of the web of knowledge that they once had concentrated in a single node, in a single place where the spider could live, where the dragon could live. Instead, he has had to diversify and create a digital and spiritual web of knowledge. You know who invented the web, right? The World Wide Web? Just take a guess. Dragons. Yep. Figure it out. Look into CERN. There's a bunch of scientists who basically run the world, right? If you didn't know that, check into that. It's a long stop. I can't get too distracted here. They're basically opening portals to reach through to the other side and let horrible demons and spirits come through and influence men and mankind and run the nightmares of the world. Anyways, that being said, look into CERN and DARPA and all these people from the United States military and people all over the world and intelligence organizations who try to build these networked information control nodes so they can have a database of knowing every single thing that's going on all the time. It's a false counterfeit omniscience because the dragon is not omniscient, okay? And neither are any of his spirits or the spirits that are in the hierarchy of the fallen side. But they have created an orchestrated web of doing that, and you cannot do it without electricity. That is literally the physical side manifestation of their spiritual network. So, anyways, this book, fantastic, absolutely transformational for me. But I gotta be honest, there's not a ton of super happy endings in it. Do you know what I mean? He talks about what this is doing to things like the colonies of bees, and it's devastating when you realize it's probably not just Monsanto's poisons that's killing the bees. It's actually our cell phones. They do experiments in here, guys, where they put a cell phone inside a beehive and just left it on for like 20 minutes. They didn't even make calls. They didn't even do like FaceTime. No, they just left it in there and on, and it shutters the bees' communication signals so badly that they all basically stop moving. The queens stop producing eggs at like almost to 25% or almost 75% less eggs, right? All these disorders start happening in the hive, and then they start getting super angry, really angry. And if you keep doing this, repeating this off and on for 5 days, around 10 days, the entire hive just disappears. They literally leave. They just freak out and leave if you keep doing that. That's just one tiny little example. He gives examples of things that happened when they started turning on microwave, like radar stations all across the eastern and western fronts during the Cold War, and how forests just started dying everywhere. Everywhere, especially, literally, trees were growing the direction away from the microwave, or from the radar stations. They were growing away. Their tree rings literally show that they're trying to grow themselves away a bit. Half the trees dying on one side and the other half's not. When they turned these things off after the wall came down, they literally started regrowing again. And what they figured out is that pine needles and leaves on trees and stuff act like aerials. And they collect and gather electromagnetic waves that are passing through the air, and they channel them basically down into the ground. And it acidifies the soil. It poisons the soil, so then the trees die. It's staggering. He goes from that to areas about understanding. Oh, I just got to pause. I can't go on too far down in the rabbit hole. You guys just need to read the book for yourselves and test it and determine what it is you need to do. But you know what that got me into? How in the world are we going to protect ourselves from this? And you know what I discovered? The Bible always has the answers, you guys. It always does, it always has, and it always will. So don't be shy about reading it. That's why I said EDC yourself with the Bible. Goodness. Anyways, so let's get into how do we counter the poisons of dragons? Are you ready for this? Linen. Yes. Sweet linen of mine. I've become converted to a Linenite tribe. It's the 14th tribe, and by that I don't mean anything biblical, so just take it easy. Pause for a second and take a deep breath. But I do intend to convert every single one of you to be a Linenite. Hook, line, and sinker. It's the best fabric in the history of mankind that I'm able to get my hands on in regular abundance for extremely good deals. Okay, so, ready for this? Linen does not conduct static electricity, and it blocks radiation. Yes, and it grows out of the ground. I've been a wool fan forever. That's because I lived in the mountains constantly. But then the father kicked my derriere down to the tropics of Florida, and I sweated like a hoss constantly, and I had to figure out something to do to survive, and linen found its way to my soul. And anyways, so I've been on a full 31 day, almost 32 days now, linen fast. I have worn nothing, and I mean actually nothing but linen for 31 days straight, and I am totally transformed. I'm not even kidding. I'm going to roll in some video clips that I'm definitely nervous about showing publicly, because you know what's happened? I broke some of my rules that I just laid out in my series earlier when it said, always wear a belt. Yeah, I went out of my house without a belt once. Okay, a few times now. I didn't carry my entire kit with me on a perpetual ongoing basis. I went on a hike in the forest without a tiny arsenal with me. It was intimidating. I wasn't used to it. You know what? But I was comfortable. I feel like when I am wearing linen, I kid you not, it's like I am suddenly calm in places of my soul that I have been restless forever. I feel so much peace and satisfaction. I feel like I put on gladness. I'm not joking, you guys. It is unbelievable how much of a transformation I feel when I am wearing linen. I can physically feel the difference in my body. And you know why? Because I'm borderline sweaty continually, day and night, all the time. And you know what? The most common symptom of being in the presence of an electromagnetic field is sweatiness. I'm not joking. Sweatiness. And I've had some sweaty feet, among other things, for a long time. But linen, you know what's amazing? Is it's super I'm not even going to use the word right. It takes moisture off of my body and sows it out into the air and creates evaporative cooling like a champion. It wicks moisture away from my body. It can regulate my temperature. Are you ready for this? 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. Think about that. That's an enormous amount compared to cotton. Okay, cotton is like wearing a sweaty factory of sweat labor, sweatshop labor. It's like literally wearing slave clothes. Cotton to me is like that. It's horrible. It's unbelievable. I feel like I'm perpetually sweaty and depressed when I'm wearing cotton. So I abandoned cotton years ago. I've refused to put that stuff on my body. But I was only ever able to find wool. And you know what doesn't work in hot climates? Wool. It's horrible. It's brutal. It's swampy. But you know what's not? Linen. And it's amazing. And what it does is it cools me down continually. My wife and I, 2 years ago almost, we got linen sheets. We started out getting linen sheets. We ordered them from some country in the Eastern Soviet bloc. I'm going to stop referring to it as the Eastern Soviet stuff as best I can, guys. But some of us grew up in an era where they still talked about things like Soviet states. It's Lithuania, I believe, or it was the Ukraine, because they grow amazing flax out there. Shout out to flax growers everywhere. If you're out there and you're listening, you are the resistance. We need to talk about growing flax. Another one, obviously, that's way up there on the running that I just haven't been able to test out is hemp clothing. I've not been able to wear hemp continually because I'm trying to convert nylon. I'm trying to get out of the nylon camp. I've been wearing nylon for so many years of my life. Basically, every single video that you're probably going to see with me is going to be in nylon, almost exclusively, because nylon was so durable it survived me crawling over rocks and crocodile dens. Scratch that. Alligator dens. It survived me doing that kind of stuff and cave spelunking when I could get a chance. But you know what hasn't? Linen. Linen hasn't surprised me even in the slightest because it biblically was an armor. If you didn't know that, linen has been the armor from the beginning, straight up. The priests were called to put linen on their bodies because you know what? They had to go in the presence of the most dangerous thing in the existence of mankind, which is the set-apart holiness of Yahweh. It's no joke. You just die in the presence of that. It's true. But you know what's so incredible is he gave them armor. And so I've studied like the ephod for a long time. And I used to study how the linen woven through with gold, if you think about it, it's kind of like a Faraday cage around their bodies, maybe to allow them to be insulated from a highly, incredibly charged electromagnetic field. That there was literally like potential electricity changes going on in that place that were so intense, it would strike you dead on the spot, son, if you did it wrong. But I think he gave them the linen as the armor. It says in Ezekiel 44:7, let's just go there. Let's do it. I'm going to do it, man. You know what? I'm so enthused about this. I didn't want to just do this whole episode on the way of the linen, but you know what? I can't even contain myself. This isn't even it. This is just a teaser, son. The way of the linen is going to be like a 39-part series. You thought I've been robust in the amount of conversation I've talked about? Wait for this. You ready? Let's get into Ezekiel. If you guys haven't read Ezekiel lately, well, most people haven't, and that's okay. But Ezekiel's foundational. It's incredible. Most people just get thrown off by the first 4 or 5 chapters when he's talking about wheels within wheels. And they're like, what? What's going on there? Some guy on the television said it's a UFO. No. Do you know there's a spirit, there's a type of angelic being that are called Ophanim? Ophanim. They're literally the chariot. They're the chariots of the Elohim. They're like the chariots of the gods, the actual ones, not the CIA-directed guys' versions. Yeah, I'm going to not digress too far down that. Anyways, the Catholic Intelligence Agency, the CIA has their little agents everywhere. That being said, we're going to go down into Ezekiel 44. You ready for this? It's 17. You ready? It shall be that when they enter at the... so this is Ezekiel 44, 17 and 18. It shall be that when they enter at the gates of the inner court, they shall be clothed with linen garments, and they shall put no wool on them while they are ministering in the gates of the inner courts and in the house. Linen turbans shall be on their heads, and linen undergarments shall be on their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that makes them sweat. Yeah, because wool definitely makes you sweat, and biblically it says so. And you know what? Yahweh knows better. So linen will cool your body down, literally 6 degrees more than cotton will. You'll sweat 6 degrees, like you're in a 6 degree hotter environment. And that makes a big difference between 79 degree, beautiful, wonderful weather, and an 85 degree day, sweaty and hot. You know what I'm saying? But I'm getting too distracted here. What I've discovered, guys, is that linen, basically, it's like an armor for you to being in the presence of an electromagnetic field. True story. Go test it out and verify it for yourself. I literally have other Gibborim friends out there that are testing this out with rapidity. I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, the good old-fashioned Underground Railroad network style, because I'm trying to rebuild the Pony Express. Check out Refuge Railroad, but I'm actually trying to rebuild the Pony Express, guys. I need ponies and horses and railroads, actual railroads. If you have a railroad, not just a railroad tie or spike, those are awesome, but if you have a railroad just lying around that you don't need, let me know. I had somebody, fantastic Gibborim out there, you know who you are, who sent me unbelievable blades. Outrageously spectacular, unique, top secret style blades that can withstand like 2,600 degree temperatures Celsius. I think it could withstand fire breath from dragons. I'm willing to test that. So if you have a fiery dragon around, you let me know. And I think I'm finally developing the armor. I'm also working on emulsifying sapphire so I can create sapphire that goes over the linen. But I'm on my way. That being said, I'm going to try to circle this all the way roundabout to David and the Gibborim. Okay, let's see if I can do this. You ready? David and his Gibborim. Oh, man. Hang on as I make a very adjustable... Okay, you ready for this? We're going to jump right back in. If you guys could be here right now, you would just see Chelsea just smiling from her chair as she listens to my quips on linen. And she's like, don't dive into linen too deep, honey. You got to ease them in slowly. You got to ease them in slowly on the linen train. Anyways, you guys, I just can't even tell you how much better I feel. Oh, that's what I was saying. Soviet bloc countries, Lithuania, we got linen sheets almost 2 years ago. And here's what we realized. We slept so much more soundly in our linen sheets, guys. It was like putting on a shield, top and bottom. We slept so good, and we were sleeping in like the worst kind of EMF fields. We slept in Walmart parking lots. And you know what's generally present in Walmart parking lots? Huge, massive cell towers and transformers, like big ones. Massive transmission lines. We used to sleep in some really not so good places when it comes to like the amount of EMF fields going off. Didn't know what we were doing. But you know what we did notice? When we climbed inside our linen, first of all, I immediately felt cooler. Like a couple of degrees cooler every single time I was in there. If you get into linen sheets, your body temperature will drop a few degrees if you need to. It's bioregulating, meaning it can adjust itself to your temperature as you need it. But it will also allow your body to pull that sweatiness away and or warm you up if you need it, because Chelsea likes to be warmer. I like to be cooler all the time. That being said, we felt like just so much more peacefulness upon us when we were in our linen sheets. It was so safe. It was so comforting and reassuring. But people that have kind of restlessness seem to sleep so much more soundly in linen. I wasn't able to figure out a lot of those reasons until this recent digression and study into these things. But I want you guys to do that too. I want you guys to go experiment with linen. So how do we find linen? Because it's prodigiously expensive. It's outrageously expensive. That being said, you know where it's not expensive? Thrift stores. I know some of you live in Soviet bloc nations where you can't go to a thrift store anymore without murdering a massive incarceration. But you know what? I'm willing to be all things to all men, and I'll put on a linen mask if I need to in order to go and infiltrate the dark side. So consider yourself figuring that out. That being said, find a way to pray to the creator of the heavens and the earth and go hunting, pearl hunting. See previous videos on pearl hunting. I pray and ask the Father to provide us linen, and we went to some thrift stores, and we found it in abundance. We found some incredible pieces of linen, and so we've been able to start converting our entire place to linen. We're working on that. I have some big dreams, but we're on our way. That being said, follow-up videos on more linen. I'm going to jump in here. Yeah. Some of you guys, you ready for this? We're going to jump all the way back into 1 Samuel 30. We got to go all the way back because I promised you guys earlier that we were going to do this. And we're going to jump into 1 Chronicles. Yes! 1 Chronicles is like a kick in the teeth of awesomeness when it comes to summarizing some of these incredible stories from 1 Samuel. You ready? Hydration. Let's do it. All right. 1 Samuel 30. Then it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had made a raid on Negev and on Ziklag and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. Remember, David had just been dismissed from going to battle against Israel by all the previous lords of the Philistines. So David and his men were going to go to war. We're going to go do a big battle. Nope, got turned around and sent back. Now, their families were all stashed in their wonderful wilderness redoubt, hideout place in Ziklag. This is in Philistine territory. They're living in enemy-occupied territory because they have the favor. Now, it says, and they took captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great, without killing anyone, and carried them off and went their way. Now, when David and his men came to the city, behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until there was no strength in them to weep. Now David's 2 wives had been taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Moreover, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him, for all the people were embittered, each one because of his sons and his daughters. But David strengthened himself in Yahweh his Elohim. So pause. This is why I always say the mighty men of David had women and children with them. They weren't lone wolfers. Some of them, yes, we're going to read that in 1 Chronicles, were definitely lone wolfers. Actually, sorry, some of them were lion hybrid men. Yeah, if you didn't know that. David's got 3 guys in his army here that are lion men. They have the faces of lions, it says. And I'm not just going to do a stupid dance on poetic imagery. It says they had lion faces and they ran like gazelles on the mountain. I've never once seen a man run like a gazelle on a mountain. I've watched a lot of people run on mountains. I've personally ran on mountains all over this country. Even in northern lands of Canada, I ran on a mountain once. And I never once ran like a gazelle. But I think they know what's the difference between a dude running like a mountain on a mountain and a gazelle running on a mountain. Big difference. Hybrid men run like champions, I think. Anyways, then David, do you realize this? David and all his men, all their families got taken captive. They're unbelievably distraught because their wives, their families, their children, their sheep, their entire spoil, all the loot that they had just got totally taken from them. And they are ready to murder David. And these guys are serious murderers. Don't forget it. If you remember, these are the guys who were in debt, distressed, and discontent that came to David in the wilderness, who became the Gibborim. These guys are people that can kill 300 dudes in just like a sitting. They can kill 300 men without even trying, basically. So now, but David is wise enough to take strength in Yahweh his Elohim. Now listen. Now David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, please bring me the ephod. That's linen. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of Yahweh, saying, shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? And he said to him, pursue, for you will surely overtake them, and you will surely rescue all. So David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those left behind remained. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 who were too exhausted to cross the brook Besor remained behind. Okay, just pause. If you've never done an all-day march in full battle rattle, I have. It's exhausting. And you know what that's coming on? Remember, David and his men from chapter 29, they had been marching all day long previously in order to go to a battle that they were on their way to. Then they were stopped, told, no, you can't go here, march all the way back. And it says they rose very early in the morning, which generally in military time means, well, I'm just going to say it, the butt crack of dawn, meaning you beat the dawn out the door and you're already on the road way before it, because you generally want to move at first light. You want to be completely moving and rolling out the door before first light occurs, right? This is pre-flashlight days, folks, meaning you couldn't generally move easily unless there was plenty of starlight and moonlight. And you could sometimes do that, but it was very uncommon. So David and his men now have been marching for who knows how long. And then they'd come home and they find their entire city burned to ground. Their wives are gone. They're so discouraged. They weep until they have no more weeping strength left in them. Then they get up and decide, let's go after these guys. Yeah, you'd be pretty fatigued too by running just dozens of miles in a day or a couple days, okay? But this is a really important thing, okay? Because this sets up a principle for a forever commandment about people that stay behind with the luggage. This sets up the supply chain, guys, why people who are in the rear of the military unit should always get equal reward of those who are in the front line, because it's really important. And here's a good example, okay? Now, when they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he ate, and they provided him water to drink, they gave him a piece of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, and he ate. And then his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Now David said to him, to whom do you belong? And where are you from? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, a servant of an Amalekite. And my master left me behind when I fell sick 3 days ago. We made a raid on the Negev of the Kethrites, and on that which belongs to Judah, and on the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And then David said to him, will you bring me down to this band? And he said, swear to me by Elohim that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring you down to this band. And when he brought him down, behold, they were spread all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Pause. Terrible decision, folks. You ready for this? If you conquer lands and you're just crushing life, don't get drunk with the spoils. Do you know what I mean? Because you're not home yet. Until you're behind the walls of your fortified city, probably not a good idea to be drunk and partying for your awesome victory. But you know what? Doofus wins. This day, his own death wish. You ready? David and the mighty men slaughtered them from the twilight until the evening of the next day. And not a man escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken and rescued his 2 wives. And nothing of theirs was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that they had taken for themselves. David brought it all back. So David had captured all the sheep and the cattle which the people drove ahead of the other livestock, and they said, this is David's spoil. When David came to the 200 men who were too exhausted to follow David, who had also been left at the brook of Besor, and they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him, then David approached the people and greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless men, the men of Belial, among them, those who went with David, said, because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. But David said, you must not do so, my brothers. With what Yahweh has given us, who has kept us and delivered us into our hand the band that came against us? And who will listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down to the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. Their share shall be alike. So it has been from that day forward that he had made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel to this day. Okay, super fundamentally important, okay? There are men of Belial with David, okay? In David's camp are men who are definitely not good guys at all. And these are probably the same guys that just previous verses ago were conspiring to murder David. David recognizes he's got some bad eggs in his hen's nest. Do you know what I mean? Some of those eggs are going to stink like sulfur fart bombs very soon here. And David is handling them to the best of his ability. And this is a wonderful way of how our leader sets up a principle that is so critically important. And if you've ever been on the supply chain side of a military combat scenario, you also have to be valued and respected in a way so that you're valued to the same level as the patriotic hero poster guy who's always on the front line fighting the dirty, gritty battles. You know what I mean? Because you know what that guy can't do? Pull the trigger one time without a good loader all the way back, generally in Utah. For some reason, Utah always cranks out some fantastic ammunition. Shout out to Utahians. You guys make great bullets. Lake City. Anyways, if you can't have good guys in the supply chain, you're probably going to be toast when you run out of bullets on the front line. Do you know what I mean? So David sets up something here for the spoils of war that are really important, and he makes sure that the sons of Belial don't get a victory over them. That being said, now, when David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, behold, a gift for you from the spoil of the enemies of Yahweh, and to those who were in Bethel, and to those who were in Ramoth of the Negev, and to those who were in Dachtir, and to those who were in Aurora, and to those who were in Sephoth, and to those who were in Estomia, and to those who were in Rakal, and to those who were in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, and to those who were in the cities of the Kenites, and to those who were in Hormah, and to those who were in Barashan, and to all those who were in Athak, and to those who were in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and with his men were accustomed to go. David resupplies the places that had been providing him a house of refuge in the wilderness. David is a man who rewarded those who blessed him and provided for him. But David was even a man who blessed his enemies. Reference the entire way he's treated Saul, okay? David is the embodiment of what to do when overwhelming, unstoppable bad news comes barreling down on you, like your worst kind of nightmare news, all right? Are you ready for this? I would equate David's circumstances here to a rolling barrage of artillery, all right? Or it's called sometimes a creeping barrage. Are you ready for this? Ephesians 6. Let's just go there real quick. I'm gonna go into some of the tactics of the dragon here for a moment and teach you why your shield is so fundamentally critical of this piece of your toolkit, because you got to learn how to withstand some serious frontal assaults. Ready? Ephesians 6. Okay? Put on, this is Ephesians 6:10. Finally, be strong in Yahweh and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of Elohim so that you will be able to stand firm against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, rulers, powers, forces of this darkness, and against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of Elohim so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. Stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all these things, above all else, take up the shield of faith with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. With all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in view, be on the alert, and with all perseverance and petition for all the saints. And pray on my behalf, that utterance may be given to me, an opening of my mouth to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel. Okay. The shield is above all else the most important part of your kit, because you know what? Even if you had to go into battle with only one thing in your hands, you know what it says to bring? Your shield, because it's a guarantee you're going to get shot. It's 100% promised. You are going to be onslaughted. You are going to be barraged by a fiery missile. Okay, when I started looking at fiery missiles, I got super distracted into trench warfare, because artillery is some of the most incredible, horrifying things if you're on the other side of it, but it's still one of the most catastrophically impactful tools that you have as a tactician against your enemies, all right? It's the distance tool. And it talks about fiery arrows here. Fiery missiles might be a little bit better one. So then I started looking up kind of what are literally called fire arrows, people that figured out ways to put kind of pyrotechnics on the front ends of missiles and launch those at the enemy. It's the early form of rockets, kind of. But the premise being that if you have your shield of faith, you are able to extinguish, to put out, to utterly neutralize the burning, fiery, sulfury bad news that's coming your way. But sometimes the enemy launches an all-out assault on you. You ready for this? Here's a character who got so barraged, attacked in a single day. It's pretty much literally listed in the scripture as like the worst day ever almost in the history of mankind. It's Job. Job gets attacked in such a strategically destructive way. It is a nothing less than an all-out attack by the Satan himself. Most of us have had some bad days in our life. Some of us have had some particularly bad ones. I don't know if any of us can personally say for certain Satan himself appealed to Yahweh to destroy us. That's pretty much up there on like the worst things ever to happen when Satan himself is like, I'm going to bullseye you today. Now, check this out. There's a tactic that they used in World War I to launch basically an offensive. When you wanted to get your troops out of your trench that you had, the land that you had taken, the ground you had, your fortified position, and you wanted to go across this middle zone called no man's land, where people just didn't go generally because they'd get shot really quickly, either by either side, or mortared, or they'd get hit with artillery, or they'd get hit with machine gun fire, or by a sniper, or by chemical warfare weapons, or by razor wire. You know, there was a lot of bad things, or just mud. Mud killed a lot of people, guys, a lot of them. There's a whole other story on mud floods I can't get into right now. That being said, it was a bad news bears land. That being said, they were to crawl over the trenches and try to take the other ground. So they would launch a huge barrage of artillery, just pounding the snot out of the enemy for a while. Sometimes a few minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes days, guys. Days. They would just boom, boom, boom. Just perpetual artillery strike. Okay. This would cause people to not generally be manning their machine gun positions or their sniper's nests and stuff like that. They'd have to fall back to their more fortified positions or go into their tunnels. But when they would stop shooting, then their infantry was supposed to run across no man's land and then get into the other guy's camp, right? Well, generally, other people would get back out in their machine gun nest and shoot the other guy when they were coming back over. So they said, you know what we'll do? A creeping barrage. We will slowly inch our artillery forward, and just behind this wall of catastrophic explosions, we will have our infantry marching behind it. And so they would launch a wave of destruction slowly forward to the enemy's line in order to shield them, but also to destroy the enemy. And you know what? They found out it wasn't super strategic, because they ended up sometimes raining mortar shells directly on their own guys' heads, or it was just the timing wasn't good. So what they figured out is you had to use it in very small precision movements, that they could do it not on a huge scale. You couldn't do this with like 5,000 guys. But if you did it with a small, say, a platoon or maybe even a company at a time, you could take some serious ground by creating a wall of destruction just ahead of them. This is exactly how the fiery arrows sometimes come at us, right? And really, Job is like the epitome of that. He gets hit by a rolling barrage from Satan, the dragon himself, that is so strategic, because you know what? Here's how he did it. You ready for this? This is Job 1. Then Yahweh said to Satan, okay, first of all, Job has a hedge of protection around him. That's the perfect shield. You ready? And then Satan answered Yahweh, does Job fear Elohim for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and in his house and on all he has, on every side? You blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Then Yahweh said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not put forth your hand on him. So Satan departed from the presence of Yahweh. Now on the day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans attacked and took them, and they slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of Elohim fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now while he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. And it fell on the young people, and they died. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. Yahweh has given, and Yahweh has taken away. Blessed be the name of Yahweh. Through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame Elohim. That is a rolling barrage. That's your worst case scenario. And yet Job demonstrates nothing but the shield of faith. He puts up a shield of faith because Job had a walk that had been established from the beginning. Job, it said, this is what Yahweh said about Job. Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing Elohim and turning away from evil. Job is literally the most blameless man on the earth, meaning his shield of faith is literally the best on the earth. But you know when you got to find out if someone's shield is really good? You got to get shot. The only way you're ever going to actually know if your shield has any battle readiness is if you go step face first into the enemy's camp and get shot with it. And you find out, you know what? Faith is immortal. Faith is something that's basically never going to stop. Faith is something that is unquenchable. It is destruction to the enemy's fiery arrows. It quenches the horror of the enemy's fire, worst nightmare. It cannot stop it. It does an amazing thing to extinguish all of the enemy's fiery launches and onslaughts. It can extinguish those fire arrows like nothing else in the history of the world. That being said, Job demonstrates for us that his faith was without reproach. His faith was sound. His shield was not built on a faults of men. It wasn't built on the fears of man. It wasn't built on his plenty. It was built on the faithfulness of his creator. He was able to be sustained by it. He blessed and he worshiped. He offered a sacrifice of praise with his lips. Yeshua, Jesus, when he was contending with the devil in the wilderness, he didn't use his shield there. He used the sword. He used the Torah, the first 5 books. He corrected and rebuked Satan with the sword that came from his mouth. But later, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was resisting sin to the point of sweating and losing his own blood, he sweated and resisted temptation to the point of shedding his own blood and started the redemptive class when he was being tempted by death and by the fear of death. Read Hebrews 2-4. When he was resisting that, when he was resisting there, he was resisting. He was withstanding by his faith. He was yielding to the faithfulness of his Father in heaven. He used his shield in the garden, but he used his sword when he was in the wilderness. And right here we see Joe doing the same thing. I have been studying the poisons of the dragon for a long time, and I am realizing that the enemy has rebuilt Babel amongst us. He has literally rebuilt with brick by brick. Literally, asphalt, tar, and bricks. He's built a civilization unto himself where man can become of one mind, of one thought, of one purpose that is so devoted to ultimately the destruction of the Creator's people, his way, his walk, his priests, his people, his peculiar and strange people. The enemy is devising a way to strategize, to seek, kill, and destroy every single man, woman, and child, and he has electrified the world to enable the ability for them to do that. This is the same as that which David was facing when they came and found their families, their wives, and everything that they'd ever known and loved had been taken captive. Our entire civilization has been taken captive by dragons, by serpents, by corporations, by kings, by commoners alike. We have been ensnared to the wiles of the devil. We have taken and drinking from the doctrines of Balaam. We have been seduced into disobeying his word, disobeying his instructions and his commands to us. And by doing so, we are suffering the curse of Yahweh. This is what Balaam so masterfully figured out, that you could not curse the people of Yahweh. You could not curse them if Yahweh had blessed them. Job, they could not be cursed by the dragon because Yahweh had blessed him. The only way that they could get the people of Israel to be cursed was to get them to compromise their faith, was to get them to sin, was to get them to transgress, to fall short of the commandment, to disobey the commandments of Yahweh. That is how Balaam, the master sorcerer, the divinator of kings, compromised the body of the Israelites. He got the Moabite women to seduce them, to use a vain thing to seduce them into worshiping Baal Peor, the god of many holes, the most explicitly defiling god of the Baals that were in existence at that time. He got them to compromise with them, and because of that, he allowed Yahweh himself curse the people. The fire of Yahweh broke through and burned the people because they no longer were wearing their armor. Their armor had been taken off so they could do a lewd thing, and because of that, his fire consumed them. But you know what? One man rose up from amidst the congregation. One man saw the abominations being done in the midst, and he took a spear in his hand, and he smote and he stopped the plague from happening by cutting down the root of that cancerous tree that was growing up among them. Phinehas. If you haven't read about Phinehas, go read your own Bible and study for yourself, guys. I can't fix you guys. I can't be the one that you guys look to help you in this. You guys have got to learn to study the scriptures for yourself. You have got to learn how to take upon yourselves the hunger for the word. I pray every day that he gives me a hunger for his word, that I would know him more. I pray every day he does that for you. I pray you would begin to get vigilant about the word and begin to study it with the ferocity and the intensity that you devote yourself to. Because you know what? At the end of the day, I am a weak and feeble man. I am not able to bear up and help others in any way beyond my current capacity. This is the way that I can help people. I wish I could be out there and minister to serve people more in a deeper capacity, but I have to still receive my own ministering of my heart of healing and restoration and deliverance. I'm not able to. I know there's so many out there that have reached out to me that would love for me to be able to talk with them and counsel with them and tend to them and help them and get them healing in so many ways. All I can do, you guys, is point you to the one who healed me. I cannot be the one to heal you guys. You cannot look to me for that. I love you guys. I care about so many of you, but I physically do not have the time nor the capacity to tend to you guys in those ways. that is not my calling in any capacity. I would like to be able to do that. This is how I do that. This is the only way I can do that. Between nap times, while my children are sleeping, or when like everybody goes to bed, there's tiny little bursts of windows of time that I have to try to eke out one of these videos between building fences or mending barbed wire, and planting plants, and laboring by the sweat of my brow to find a place where my family and I can eat and live and have sustenance for us to go forth from here. I'm a very busy person, and because of that, I'm not able to minister to many aspects of my own healing or to the healing of others, but this is how I minister to you guys. The way that you can get the healing that I have found is only through the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and by not loving your life even unto death. Study the word for yourself. Learn to study it. Learn to hunger for it. Learn to desire it. Pray the prayers and the resources that I put in the back of the book that I talk about on a regular basis. Devote yourself to that, because I think if each of us would take up our shields of faith and we would begin to contend with the enemy, to withstand the enemy, we would see that onslaught, that barrage be broken off of us, and we would begin to take ground back from the enemy, that we would take captive every thought and vain imagination and make it submissive to the Messiah. That is your calling and your edict. You have a battle plan that is laid out in the scripture that is waiting for you, and I pray that you would eagerly take hold of it, that you would seek with relentless devotion to find his truth to be your shield, your belt that girds you about and carries you forth to do his will on this earth. I love you guys. I pray that you would help me seek with vigilance to dismantle the strongholds of the enemy, to undo what they've done in establishing this network of destruction amongst us. We must take captive those lands and those thoughts and seize with absolute ferocity the word that is alive and active, that we might see the redemption of those who are suffering and in bondage, that we might bear up hope and life and truth. I love you all. I pray you'd be vigilant. I pray you'd be safe out there. And by that, I mean live as dangerously as possible every single day of your life, because the days are evil. But you were born for such a time as this. Take strength in the Elohim of creation.